Ons is in 'n seisoen in die gemeente waar ons fokus na buite. Ons kyk uitwaarts, ons kyk hoe ons verder kan gaan. En ons het 'n gas vanaand hierso saam met ons, met wie ek later 'n onderhoud sal voer, Given Mkari. En Given het net voor die diens vir my gevra of ek asseblief in Engels sal preek, sodat hy kan verstaan en sodat hy kan link met my preek, as ek hom gaan onderhoud. So julle moet genade met my hê vanaand, terwyl ek hier voor staan en in Engels praat. This song by Phil Collins won a Grammy in the 1990s. It was his most successful song. It spent the longest time of all his singles on the Billboard 100, and it was voted as one of the top 100 songs of the 20th century. And what's even more remarkable, I remember as a young boy listening to this song, I realized that this is not your typical pop love song. This guy is singing about something serious. He's singing about us being privileged, and we don't realize that we are privileged. He says, for you and me, it's just another day in paradise. And we're comfortable with that. I looked at statistics this week. If you live in a brick house with a proper foundation, it doesn't have to be your house. If you live in a brick house with a proper foundation, you are in the top 20% of the world. If you earn 7,000 rand or more a month, you are in the top 13% of the world income group. If I told your mom at your birth that you will be in the top 13% of the world, I guess she would have said, I'll take it. I'll take it. My son and daughter can be in the top 13% of the world. That's fine. I'll take it. But we have a problem with the self. We struggle to look beyond the self. And that's always been a problem for humanity. Since Greek mythology told us about Narcissus, all the way to our culture of taking selfies, the self has always been a problem. This week I went into YouTube. I wanted to see how many videos I can find about taking selfies and how to improve the selfies I take of myself. Do you want to guess how many hits I found? 2.83 million videos on YouTube on selfie tips. Now the two big ones, remember this, is always lift up the camera so you can hide your double chin. Very important. And also, don't turn your face to the side when taking a selfie, because your nose is a lot bigger than you think. See, I read these words a couple of years ago, and I think it's so true. Never has a generation so diligently documented themselves accomplishing so little. And I don't know who said it. I tried to find it on the internet. There's a lot of beautiful pictures with these words, but I can't find who said it. And I think the reason we can't find it, it's so controversial. But why is the self a problem? Take a look at these words of James in the Message translation, chapter 4, verse 1. He says, where do you think all these appalling wars and quarrels come from? Do you think they just happen? Think again. They come about because you want your own way and fight for it deep inside yourselves. That is the problem with the self. If everybody just looks to themselves, we have big problems. All the conflict in your personal relationships, your work relationships, conflict between cultures, conflict between countries. It's because we all look to the self. One of the great saints said the following, that heaven or hell is not a geographical destination, but it's a state of mind. And therefore, hell is a place where everybody just takes care of themselves. John the Baptist had an interesting life. He was sent out before Christ to prepare the way for Christ. And he was an interesting character. And we see in Scripture that he had a lot of followers. And he became very popular. And he gets confronted by this. And take a look at his words in John chapter 3, verse 28 to 30. And unfortunately, given these words are in Afrikaans, but God understands Afrikaans. Julle is self my getuies dat ek gesê het, ek is nie die Christus nie. Ek is maar net voor hom uitgestuur. Die bruidegom is die een aan wie die bruid behoort. Maar die vriend van die bruidegom staan en luister of hy kom en is baie bly wanneer hy die stem van die bruidegom hoor. Daarom is ek nou met blydskap vervul. Hy moet meer word en ek minder. John says, guys, it's not about me. I have done what I was supposed to do. I am not the Messiah. I just prepared the way. And it's time for me to get out of the way. And then he uses this beautiful Jewish analogy. And this was custom in the Jewish culture for the best man of the bridegroom to wait at the tent of the bride. And as soon as he hears the bridegroom coming, he moves away because the bride belongs to the bridegroom. And then John says an important thing. He says, he should become more and I should become less. Very important. Now, what happens to our lives when Christ becomes more and we become less? What is the result of Christ becoming more in our lives and us becoming less? In the first place, we understand the needs of others better. It's not about us anymore, but it's about them. Listen to these words of Paul in Philippians 4. He says, make it as clear as you can to all you meet that you're on their side, working with them and not against them. When Christ becomes more, we stop competing. And I've seen this in the corporate environment. I've seen how managers stop competing with other managers, but help them because Christ is becoming more in their lives. I've seen how managers offer up their bonuses for people in their team because Christ is becoming more in their lives. I start seeing others because Christ is becoming more in my life. Secondly, I see the value and the worth of others. We live in a culture where when I do something for you, I expect something back. We never see people for what they are truly worth. We always see their worth in what it is that they can do for us. Listen to these words in Philippians 2. When you do things, do not let selfishness or pride be your guide. Instead, be humble and give more honor to others than to yourselves. If Christ becomes more, I see the true worth of people, and their worth is more than just what they can do for me. Thirdly, we start to sacrifice ourselves for others. If Christ becomes more, we get to a point where we can sacrifice who we are for the benefit of others. There's a great story about a priest during the Second World War, Maximilian Kolbe. And he was at Auschwitz. And the camp where he was in Auschwitz, they had a particular game that the guards played with them. Every month, they would draw straws. And the unlucky person from this camp, the Nazi guards would take, and they would place him in solitary confinement to see how long this individual can last without food and water. And then the soldiers would bet on it. and the winner would take all the money. Now, this one morning, a gentleman drew the straw. And as the Nazis took him to the one cell for solitary confinement, he started crying and said, I still have a wife and kids and I want to see them. And this Reverend Maximilian Kolbe, he stepped forward and said, take me instead and put me in the cell. He lasted 13 days without water and food. But the good news is the individual he sacrificed his life for lived through Auschwitz and got to see his family again. When Christ becomes more and there's less of me, I get to a point where I start sacrificing myself. There's two scriptures in the Bible that always bothers me about this. The first one is in Exodus 32, verse 32. These are the words of Moses. He says, but now please forgive their sin. But if not, then blot me out of the book you have written. What's Moses saying? He's saying, take my eternity with you, but save my people. Look at the words of Paul in Romans 9, verse 3. He says, my heart is heavy within me, and I grieve bitterly day and night because of you. Christ knows, and the Holy Spirit knows, that it is no mere pretense when I say that I would be willing to be forever damned if that would save you. Both Moses and Paul says the same thing. Says, God, please save these people and take my life. And that's what Christ did for us. He sacrificed himself. And if we are serious as Christ followers, if he becomes more and we become less, we will get to this point where we sacrifice ourselves, where we see the true worth of other individuals, and when we start seeing the value of other people. But more importantly, we look beyond ourselves to the needs of others. We stop competing and we start working with other individuals. Now, like I mentioned earlier, we have a guest with us this evening, Given Mkari, and I'm going to ask him to come on stage and then I'll do a short introduction. Maybe just something about Given. Given is the founder and the executive chair of the MSG Africa Group. I don't know who of you know of Power FM, but he's the founder of Power FM. Please come through, Given. Yeah, you're welcome to sit down. Thank you.
Thanks, bro.
Welcome.
Thank you.
He's the founder of Power FM, Capricorn FM in Limpopo, Beat 105.2 in Bloem. Do the people in Bloem have Beat?
They do. They do.
And then Rhythm FM in the Eastern Cape. And he's also invested in various media and communication companies across the African continent. Now, something that's also important is until 2009, he was the director of the International Marketing Council of South Africa, appointed by the President of the Republic of South Africa. And he asked me beforehand, Herman, please tell these whiteys that it was Thabo Mbeki who appointed me and not Jacob Zuma. Given, welcome. Thank you so much for your time. It's such a privilege to have you with us. Given is a good friend of Brand Pretorius, who you know is a mentor to us in the Antioch Activist Program, our entrepreneurship program. And when I spoke to Brand said, you've got to get Given to come and speak to your young professionals in the church. And Brand believes that Given is a great example of somebody who's moved beyond himself in business to really empower others. So thank you very much for your time. We really appreciate it, Given. And if I may, I'd like to start with the first question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you grew up.
No, thank you so much. Goeienaand allemaal. Kan maar bietjie Afrikaans. Ek kan maar bietjie probeer om Afrikaans te praat. My Afrikaans is nie baie goed nie. I'm from Zanin, a village called Begersdorp. in Limpopo. I'm the eldest of 6 children. I was very lucky at a very young age to be born out of a very loving and caring mother who believed in me so much, even before I knew my name. The story goes that when I was born, one of my aunties wanted to name me Innocent. And my mother did not like the name because my mother went up to standard 2. So she thought if I were to be called Innocent, I will grow up with no sense. So she said, no, he will not be innocent, he'll be given. So he will have a lot of gifts.
Great.
I'm a father of 4 girls, beautiful girls. I'm told that it takes a man to make a woman. So I'm surrounded by so much love from my daughters. And I love what I do, and I'm very blessed to be living in one of the most beautiful places in the world. So I love my country and my people dearly.
Given, who are the people who've been selfless to invest in your life? As you were growing up and in your career, did you have people who looked beyond themselves to invest in you?
No, absolutely. The number one is going to be my beautiful late mother, who I remember, I think I was doing about standard 4. Some of you might be too young. That will be today grade 6. And I sneezed. How do you say sneeze in Afrikaans?
Niece.
Sneeze. Yeah. I did a proper sneeze. And when I sneeze, my sneeze is very loud. And this is 1984. And my mother says to me, are you going to sneeze like that in parliament? And at a young age, I wondered, in apartheid South Africa, how could my mother warn me about sneezing and talk to me about parliament, because my people are not allowed to be parliament. And that thought stayed with me throughout, because even when the world was not ready for me, my mother kind of prepared it for me. And I see a lot of mothers here. You know, it makes a big difference as parents. The small little things that we whisper to our children at a very young age, they stay with them forever. So when people talk about role models, my mother has got to be that person. My aunt as well. And I was also blessed to have some amazing teachers all my life. So between my mother and my teachers, those are people who saw beyond themselves for me.
Wonderful. So I'm wondering, given what role has your faith played in your life?
We are fundamentally spiritual beings. We are spirit. The Bible tells us that we are made in His name. And I therefore can't even define me outside spirituality, outside the spirit. And this is beyond religion. So I look at everything about me. I'm the eldest of 6 children. I'm a farm boy. I'm Shangan. I'm from Limpopo, Nogal. I am today the operator, the largest operator of private radio, commercial private radio in South Africa. In numeric terms, only second after the SABC. What are the chances? And I'm black in South Africa. I'm 43. What are the chances? I'm sitting in front of a congregation full of Boere Maces and Boere boys. What are the chances? So you can't explain it in skill terms, in just your own abilities. There are so many people who work hard, but there are a whole lot of things about myself that I can't explain in physical terms. That is God at play. That is God at work. So Psalm 23, which a lot of us can easily narrate, first line, the Lord is my shepherd. As a boy who comes from a farm place, I've come to understand that smart and intelligent shepherds hardly come ahead of you. Most times, they lead from behind, right? But they also give you the option to digress. And so there's a sense of responsibility for you as an animal. But you know, once you follow the word and the ways and the means of the shepherd, the next line says, I shall not want. Now, wanting for me is a very deep spiritual reference because it speaks about feeling a much deeper void that can't be taken care of by money or friendship or fame. Wanting is deeper than needing or wanting in physical terms. But for you to experience that level of fulfillment and meaning, you gotta allow the shepherd to do his job. So I don't think there's an English word like this, but I've learned to accept to be shepherded, if there's an English word like that, by the shepherd at a very young age. And what then happens is that you don't get easily faced by daily so-called misfortunes. You are at ease with trusting that the Bible tells us as well that God can't and won't give you more than you can handle. And that only happens when you are connected and are in sync with the shepherd. And that's what it is. I've run businesses where I've lost a lot of money. But what has kept me going is exactly that knowledge that there's a shepherd that knows what's good for me. And I'm being sharpened for bigger and better things. And unfortunately or fortunately, those of us who believe that we are connected to our Maker also carry a bigger responsibility not to represent that Maker because we then become renowned and get to be perceived by society as self-declared ambassadors of the shepherd. And that is a tougher task.
Big responsibility. So how do you serve God in the business environment?
Back to spirituality, I'm of the firm view, the Bible tells us that we are made in God's image. We are also told that He lives in us. I'm of a firm view that God created fat people for a reason, skinny people for a reason, short people for a reason, those with big noses and tail surface for a big reason. And I think that the bulk of people who live in hell, and I loved your analogy around hell, are those that have declared themselves to be more in the know than their creator. God the shepherd is the master. And with which one of us he has created his own masterpiece that he's very proud of. Now, if I'm going to decide to be something else other than that which God has designed me for, I'm being naughty. I'm being defiant. I'm telling God that He has made a mistake with me. Now, if I was God, that would be very personal. So I have lived my life and I continue to strive to be as proximate and as close as possible to that which the DNA, the original design, that God had in mind when He brought me to this earth. So I think that life's biggest challenge is a perpetual and everyday quest to be as close as possible to the original design and that purpose that was tailor-made by the Master to be you. So the first example, in my view, the ultimate praise and worship song, I believe, is by honoring that which God created you for from the onset. But you see, you can't honor something you don't know what it is. So the challenge that comes before that is self-mastery. What is it that my Creator brought me here to do? Because you see, as I was saying to Herman earlier on, if I'm supposed to be a glass of cold water and I decide to be hot coffee, I'm going to ban a lot of tongues because people expect to drink cold water when they see me. So I'm of the view that an everyday attempt of understanding what is it that God brought me here to do is the first step towards finding oneself. And because we're made in God's image, in finding our organic or original self, we are getting closer to the designer, the master, who is our creator. And that's how we praise God. And then we realize that in serving the creator authentically, almost all of us are not designed for self. And therefore are able then to serve others because we are both made for a much bigger purpose than ourselves. And we misrepresent God when we think you're a car when you're supposed to be an aeroplane. You know, you drive people when you're supposed to be flying people. So finding one's organic brief from God is the first step of honoring God's work. And you realize that you're honoring God's work when you're not serving self. How do I do it? In my job, my skills, my passion, my love is the communication business. And how does it work? By bridging the communication gaps that exist. It is worse in South Africa where there was a well-orchestrated and designed system that is called apartheid. The insight around apartheid was to separate people as much as possible by instilling fear amongst God's children so they live and look at each other with suspicion. My job and my task, amongst other things, is to help break that gap, that fear, that suspicion. I asked Hermann earlier on to say, how come I don't see darkies in your church? And he says to me, well, maybe it's because we are an Afrikaans-speaking church. And I asked him, I'm a very proud Shangaan man. I love my language. And I respect every South African, as a matter of fact, every human being who embraces each and every feature that God gave them. It could be their height, as I said. One other feature is the language and the culture. So we must encourage people to embrace all of them, including their languages. But as leaders of society, particularly for young South Africans, I think we also have another bigger task, which is how do we ensure that some of the things that we are proud of that have been used by people who meant to separate us, that unbeknown to us, we also do not perpetuate the very same fear and separation. And I think those of us who believe we're believers, we need to ask ourselves to say, to what extent could something as legitimate and as beautiful, yet sensitive like language, how do we ensure that the very same tool is not used to separate children's God from finding one another? Because when we wake up tomorrow and we go to work, we are going to interact with a much bigger society. So creating small spaces for me as a Shangaan man, for you as a guy from KZN, etc., might actually be in contradiction with the things that those of us who believe we're spiritual people and children of God don't actually mean to originally.
And given, how have you come to that point where you realize that you need to move beyond yourself and that it's not about yourself?
It's by listening. It's about, and listening for me is not just using your ears. It's by being curious. It's by questioning each and everything around you. It's about questioning what your parents told you. It's about questioning what your teachers told you. It's about questioning, as I was looking at the video here, this amazing institution, and I think the founders behind this church really, really deserve an amazing round of applause about the work that you do in communities. It's about asking, why is it that when it's time to give, there are young, poor black kids who are given food? Why is that? Is it that black people by nature are dependents who should always be given something, you know? Or should they be challenged to be brought into the center to interact with people like Hermann and given, so that next time we look at the future of and the pictures of people in need, it's not always black kids queuing and celebrating a toilet that is delivered to them. It's about questioning everything. And I think the more we question and open ourselves, we'll realize that we shortchange ourselves more than we assume. It's about praying. It's about questioning God, you know? And ultimately, I find that, and I loved what I saw as well about, the other place that you're showing there,
Embark Foundation, the baby house.
right?
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of talk about being quiet and being in a space.
Oh, that's
What is-
Origins, the
I
retreat.
want to go there, bro. Please take me there. I want to go to that place. It's about being silent enough to ask questions and praying. And ultimately, you hear God's voice because the things that you naturally gravitate towards, the things that speak to your soul, the things that you don't have to try too hard, and even if they are hard, the things that you don't easily give up on are likely to be the spaces where you're likely to hear God's voice.
Given, as you've heard, we're in a season where we look outwards, where we want to move further to make an impact in the world for God's kingdom. And I think you've given us a lot to think about tonight. So thank you very much. Let's give Given a hand.
Thank you very much. Oh, wait. Somebody spoke about, I want to take a selfie with all of you. All of you.
Let me take it.
No, selfie. Selfie, remember? Come. I hope I can see you guys.
Can see you're in the media industry.
Can I have a bit of lights, production?
In-house.
In-house, lights, please. Thank you, Boots. That's it.
Brilliant.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. God
Thank
bless
you.
you.
Thank you, Given. Waar is jy vanaand? Ek het so baie gehou van wat Given gesê het, dat as jy jouself kan ontdek en dit wat God vir jou gegee het, jou gawes, jou passie, jou persoonlikheid, jou unieke samestelling, as jy dit kan ontdek, en jy kan God toelaat om deur jou te werk met dit, jy hoef nie iemand anders te wees nie. Jy kan net jouself wees, maar om op 'n plek te kom waar jy met 'n openheid leef dat God deur jou kan werk om ander mense se lewens te bereik.